Hi, welcome to Mondays with Madeline. I'll be your host, Madeline. Today we're going to be doing a cookbook review of this book, Aquavit. It is a 2 Michelin star restaurant in New York. It's been open since 1987. The current chef is not the chef that wrote this book, but he is a James Beard award-winning chef named Samuelsson. Swedish born, and the whole concept of the food is new Scandinavian cuisine. And I'm just gonna go ahead and get started right in on everything. The first recipe that we're gonna do today is lobster rolls with pickled Asian pears. I chose this recipe because it has a very unique flavor profile to it. And after you read this book and read about the chef, I think this is one of those types of recipes that really clearly shows the type of chef that he is. Every chef has their own way of doing things and a special touch that they have with the food that they create. So we're gonna start right in on this, and I'm gonna go ahead and slice our Asian pears. Sometimes Asian pears are hard to find at different supermarkets, but if you can't find them, in the recipe it suggests that you can use Bosch pears. Since this is a review, I've already made this recipe 3 times now. Just to kind of practice and see if there are certain things that were difficult to do. One of the things that I first figured out was getting the slice thickness on the pears is really, really important to roll these correctly. So I actually specifically bought this this Mandolin slicer to do it. I have another one, but it was just too small width-wise for me to cut a pear this size. Also, if you use the Bosch pears, don't get super ripe ones. They fall apart and disintegrate in the pickling liquid that you use. So that was kind of one of those surprise bits of information. Okay, so one of the really important things about this recipe is the thickness of this pear slice. You want it to be paper thin because you're going to turn this into a roll, almost like you would a sushi roll. And don't cut your fingers on the mandolin. It's super easy to do. But I'm going to do a couple practice slices just to check the thickness of my setting here, and I think I need to go a little bit thicker on that slice. All right, so here we go. That's what I just got off of there, and that's what I just got off of there, and that's about the thickness that we're looking for. You want it to be paper thin. And the key is with this is you keep going, you want to get them a whole bunch sliced, and you want to check the inside because you don't want the core of this. The core of just like any pear or apple has the seeds and kind of a weird crunchy bit to it, and that's what you don't want to use. So now that I've gotten to this part where I can start seeing this rind, I'm going to stop on that side. I'm going to collect all my slices out from underneath my mandolin. I'm going to pop them in this bowl here, and I'm going to switch to the other side. And I'm gonna do the same thing on that side. Now, since you've cut this, it's gonna be slippery, so just, watch your fingers once again. Go slowly if you need to. Mandolins are really sharp, especially when you have a brand new one. And I've seen a lot of people, professionals in professional kitchens, slice their fingers off. So once you have all your slices done, the pickling liquid that you use for this recipe is actually called 1-2-3 Swedish vinegar. I'm not sure why they call it that, but I've already pre-made mine so that we didn't have to wait for that to get done. And it's a sweet pickling liquid. There's white wine vinegar, water, white peppercorns, allspice, onions, carrots, and bay leaves in this. And it has a really, really wonderful smell. Oh, and lots of sugar. Lots and lots of sugar in this one. Way more than you would an average pickling liquid or brine. You just want to put enough in here to kind of cover the top of these. I'm going to go ahead and kind of separate my slices just a little bit so that they get some good coverage on that. The book suggests that you set this aside for about 20 minutes to soak. In all of my test batches, I think 20 minutes is a little bit too long. With the Bosch pears, if you do it with those, it will actually disintegrate them in that amount of time. With the Asian pears are a little firmer, so they don't fall apart quite as easily. So these I'm gonna do about 10 minutes-ish. You just wanna get that flavor in there, and since they're sliced so thin and the pickling liquid is strong enough, it's not gonna take that long to have that full flavor. The next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna take my lobster. I've already cooked the lobster off. And the lobster is just easy. You just boil it in water and cool it down, and then you take the meat out of the tails. And then I'm gonna take some of this fresh cilantro here. I'm just gonna chop a little bit of it off. Not everybody is as picky about this as I am, but I like to de-stem mine. I don't like the little stems in it. I like the texture to be better than that. I'm a little bit picky though. Cilantro is one of my favorite herbs to work with, and I share that feeling with Marcus Samuelsson, the chef for this book. He in Swedish cooking, they use a lot of coriander, and coriander is just the seed of cilantro. So when he started making his own recipes, one of the things that he started doing was including fresh cilantro into a lot of the recipes, even though traditionally speaking, that wasn't one of the things that they would necessarily do in Swedish cooking. But I think it's been a wonderful addition, and when it comes to this recipe in particular, it seems like he's almost fused several different types of cooking together, like different cultures. I feel like there's some Asian going on in here, and not just from the Asian pear, but there's in the sauce that we're gonna make for this, he uses white miso, and that's a fermented sauce. A lot of people have heard it in reference to ramens and different things like that. All right, so I'm just gonna add a little bit to this. I'm gonna go probably a little heavy on mine. As I've said, I've made this recipe a couple of times, and I personally just really enjoy cilantro a lot, so I like to make this one a little bit more cilantro heavy. Add a little bit more of these tomatoes. All right, now that I've got that mixed up, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix together the ingredients for the sauce that we're going to coat this in. Right here I have lime juice. It's just a 1/4 cup. The recipe size that I'm making is a full-size recipe batch for a really large batch of this lobster roll mix. We don't need that much. The white miso, it's a paste. So this I like to mix in with the lime juice first to get it really broken up. That's why I'm using a whisk. If you don't break it up, it's gonna stay chunky, and nobody wants chunks. Now, the recipe in the book does not call for Tabasco. It calls for something that I can't pronunciate. What is it called? It calls for something, and pardon my struggle with this, it calls for something called sambo. Maybe that's how it's pronounced. It's Swedish, who knows? But it suggests in the book to use Tabasco as a substitute. I will say this book is really great because the chef has included a lot of options for substitutes when it's, items that you can't find as easily or are, native, or he'll give you the recipe to make them. I just added in mayo to this. It is gonna be thin. It's not a thick sauce. It's just like a coating for this lobster. So obviously we don't need all of this. in my small batch. So I'm just gonna add in a little bit at a time so I don't overdo it. And that's what it should look like. All right, so our next step in this is to roll these. And if you've ever rolled sushi, it's kind of the same concept, works in a similar way. We're not going to use the bamboo. A lot of sushi rolls, they call for you to use those bamboo placemats to help you roll them. This just asks you to use plastic wrap. And so far I have had really good success. The first batch of these I did rolled, besides with what pears I could save because mine disintegrated, it rolled fairly well. I think the key, once again, is the thickness of your pear slices, and also when you lay them out, you need to make sure that they're overlapping. The overlapping is extremely important when you're doing this. If you don't overlap them, it's not gonna roll properly. You wanna make sure you leave a nice surface area for you to place the lobster meat. And you're probably thinking to yourself, pear with lobster and on top of that pickled pear. I wasn't sure how exactly this would taste, and my husband thought it was crazy for choosing this recipe because it's just a little bit weird. But when you taste the first bite of the flavors together, it's absolutely stunning. I said wow, and I don't say wow often when I eat food. I've eaten a lot of different kinds of food, and I'm open-minded, but I'm not always wowed easily by things. As you can see, I'm being picky about which pears I'm picking too. I just want to get a good one. All right. So now that I've got those laid out, I'm going to just, his suggestion for each roll is about 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna eyeball it. I want to make sure I've got a good even amount of tomatoes and lobster in this roll as well. Okay, so when you get to this point, you want to use your plastic to roll it, and you want to get it tight. Obviously, you don't want to, when you've gone to a burrito place and they roll your burrito too tight and they tear the outside shell, you don't want to do that. So one of the things that I found is I like to kind of tuck it as I go. And some of the juices from your sauce are gonna leak out a little bit, and that's fine. Just make sure you don't do this like on the edge of your counter so you don't like destroy it. Like drip it all over the floor, 'cause that's no fun. Nobody likes extra cleanup. There we go. There's our first roll. Now, one of the really cool things that I thought was fun about this recipe is that it gives you suggestions for what to serve with it. And the chef says to do a fresh herb salad. And I think the herb salad is probably one of the things that makes this truly, truly spectacular once you taste it together. My first one that I ate, I did not eat it with the herb salad, and then I went back and tried it again with it. And it was wonderful. Okay, so what I'm doing over here is I'm just slicing up some real thin slices of fresh garlic. And I'm gonna throw them in this bowl. So this fresh herb salad is all about the leaves. I'm gonna just pick a couple of really nice leaves off the cilantro. And like I said, cilantro is my favorite, so I'm gonna do this particular mix that I'm gonna make is gonna be heavier on the cilantro just because I love it. You don't have to make yours that way. If you prefer the basil or the mint, go heavier on that. But that's the other herbs in this, basil and mint. I'm gonna try to find a little tiny basil leaf so I don't have to tear any of these. I like the look of the full leaf in this for presentation's sake. I think it's just really pretty and delicate and has this wonderful look to it. Let's see, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna make sure these are separated and take out that center section. And I'm gonna do the same thing with my mint. I'm gonna take these little small pieces off the tops of these to get the really pretty little pieces. Now if I didn't have these little pieces of them, I would probably go ahead and just julienne these or make a chiffonade with them. Then it'll like disperse more evenly. So this, you do a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of lime. I'm just gonna squeeze a little bit of fresh lime on the top of that. And mix it up a little bit. I'm gonna take this. In the book too, he suggests using caviar with this. Well, I think caviar would probably be really spectacular with it in as well. I'm not gonna buy caviar for a recipe like this. Only because if I were to ever even serve this like at home, I probably wouldn't buy it for my guests. Let's go ahead and be honest. Probably gonna save my caviar for myself. Okay, so the next really important thing about this recipe is that you're supposed to use a very sharp knife to cut these. It's the same idea, once again, that you have with sushi. So I've got a slicing knife right here. I don't have a sushi knife, but I have this slicer, and it's my sharpest knife that I have right now. All my knives kind of need to be sharpened. But it works perfectly for this. If you don't have a sharp knife, this will just, your rolls will get crushed and they will tear, and then you won't get the perfect shape, because as you can see, I mean, that's gorgeous. I mean, you want it to have that presentation to it. So I'm gonna bring this over here. And there you go. So our second recipe that we're going to do is a glazed salmon with wasabi sabayon. Sabayon is a white wine sauce that you thicken with eggs. It's kind of similar to a hollandaise. This one is fairly simple. There's only a few ingredients, and it's labor intensive because you have to sit there and stir it a whole bunch. It's kind of a two-part recipe because I'm not only going to make the sabayon and the salmon, but I'm also going to make this potato pancake that's down here on the bottom. He's got his own recipe in this book as well, and it's basically just a glorified hash brown, if we're going to be honest, but it really works well with this dish and is worth the extra time to make it. Now we're ready to make the sabayon. I've got my double boiler set up. It's basically just water in a pan and then get a bowl. You can use metal or glass. Preference doesn't really matter. Just make sure this isn't boiling too high, and you don't want the bowl to touch the water. Otherwise, you'll scramble your eggs while you're making this sauce. I've got my eggs already separated. You just want the egg yolks. This right here is a mixture of white wine, dry white wine vinegar, lime juice. And I'm gonna go ahead and pour it in here with my eggs. And I'm gonna whisk it up. And then you wanna wait to add in your sabayon until it's finished. Or not your sabayon, your wasabi sauce powder. Don't use prepared wasabi for this. The powder's better because of how you're making this. Whatever you do, don't leave this and walk away when you're making it. Otherwise, you will scramble your eggs. You want to stay stirring it constantly the entire time you're making it. This is one of those recipes that you have to have a little bit of patience for. When you're making any sort of sauce like this and you're waiting for it to thicken up on a double boiler, it takes a little bit longer than you would expect, but once it starts happening, it goes very, very quickly. So the minute you think you're good to stop what you're doing and walk away is the minute that it starts to cook, and it'll scramble, and then you'll have this weird chunky sauce that looks like, well, I'm not gonna tell you what it looks like, it's gross. Sometimes sauces like this, when you're doing these, it's all by feel, and it sometimes takes getting used to making a sauce that's this consistency, because it's a little bit different than your average gravy or anything like that when you're making that type of sauce. There we go. We're gonna do a dash of salt in there, and then we're gonna go ahead and add in our wasabi powder. That wasabi powder is going to give the yellow of this sauce a little bit of hint of green, which I think is really pretty, especially once we plate all this dish up together, because the glaze that's going to go on the salmon is very dark in color. See, just there, I grabbed the side of my bowl that was very hot. Don't do that. That's a nice sauce. That'll look good on a plate. Okay, so when you do the potato pancake, I highly suggest you use a food processor to do this. You can use a cheese grater, but one or two things can happen with a cheese grater. You could either grate your finger or not get really good pieces, or both could happen. The thing that I like about using a food processor is it's quick, it's easy, and you get really uniform pieces. If your potatoes, when you do this, are really big, we're using russet potatoes, but you can use Idaho or russet, whatever, just a baking style potato. If you get a really big one that won't fit in here like this, because you want to do it long ways, then you could always cut it in half and then put it in. But you want the longest size strings of the potato as you can get. So I'm going to go ahead and put my first piece in. My food processor is the type that needs a metal piece to touch in there. So when you do this, I have to kind of start with taking it out and putting it in. But look how fast this is. And you're literally done. And then I'm going to stick in my second one. And that is it. Piece of cake. Okay, so a huge portion of this potato portion of events is that you really need to wring out your potatoes. You don't want them to be wet. So I'm gonna you could try to use a paper towel, but it just doesn't work as well because they shred too easily. So I'm gonna use a regular towel. Obviously make sure it's clean. And then I like to start it kind of like a little candy. And I'm just gonna give it a spin over the sink here. And then just dump it out in your bowl. So as you can see, these are really nice little strings of this potato. That's what you want them to look like for sure, without a doubt. I'm gonna go ahead and salt and pepper these. And I'm gonna add some onions to it. The book calls for Spanish onions, which is a yellow onion. I'm using Vidalia, mostly because I like Vidalia better. And in the recipe, when I made it the first couple times as my testers, I don't think it made much of a difference overall. Because they're not super heavy on them. And like I said, this is basically a glorified hash brown. And see, the key to this recipe, to make it look like it does in the book, is to really make sure that these are easily separated and they're not really super stuck together. The next thing you need is an egg. You want it to be lightly beaten.
Say that one again.
You want to lightly beat your egg. You don't want it to be overbeaten or underbeaten, just lightly beaten. I'm going to use a fork for this. And I'm not doing the full size recipe in this book because we don't need to eat that much food. So I'm just going to pour in a little portion of this, not the full thing. I'm going to go ahead and mix it up a little bit. Now I want to be perfect like the book is. The book has such a beautiful example of one of these potato pancakes. So one of the things is I want to make sure my pan's hot. I've had it over here kind of heating up. I'm going to go ahead and turn it up a little bit because you want it to be, you don't want your pan to be smoking hot when you do this, but you want it to be hot enough. When you do this, especially if you're doing something like this at home, I've turned my oven on here. I've just got it on 175 degrees. And it's just to kind of keep it warm when I'm going to make these, and then I'm going to make my salmon. And I want to keep them warm in the meantime so that when I go and do my plate up, I still have nice hot potato pancakes. All right, so right here I've got clarified butter. This recipe is better with butter as your for cooking rather than the olive oil or anything like that. But you don't want to just put straight butter in there because the butter solids will burn and it'll smoke and it'll taste awful. So I clarified the butter first. I'm gonna go ahead and pour it in. And then what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna try to form this into a certain type of cake. A little potato pancake. I want the strings to be kind of more separated. I don't want it to be too thick. I want it to just look just right. If I don't do a good job of this, don't make fun of me. You can. I don't care. So I'm going to take it like this. And I'm going to just separate it out a little in my pan. If you stick your fingers in your pan, don't burn yourself. I'm used to doing stuff like this because I cook for a living. Oh my god.
Oh my. There you go.
So you're gonna see me move my potato pancake a lot because I'm trying to keep the heat even on this. I don't want it to get too hot and burn on one spot where it's not golden brown on the other. It's not super important if you don't really care, but I care, and I want it to be perfectly even and crispy across the entire thing. And as you can see just by the golden brown of this is turning out really, really well. And I really truly believe that the reason why this looks as good as the one in the book is because of the way you cut it and the amount of egg you use on it. And wringing out the potatoes is super, super important. If you have too much moisture in it, it's just not going to build up as well. See? That's real pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one out. Okay, so next up is our salmon. I've got my salmon glaze ingredients set up. We've got lime juice, wasabi powder, and then this mixture, which is called ketchup mayonnaise. I'm not sure if I'm actually pronouncing that right, but the first word is where we got our word ketchup from. This is not like ketchup, believe me. I couldn't find this to purchase anywhere in stores. I'm sure I could have special ordered it, but he had a suggestion as a replacement for it, and he gives a recipe in the book. And it's a mixture of brown sugar, molasses, soy sauce, cayenne pepper, and coriander. It's pretty interesting. It's got a really nice smell to it. When you make a batch of this, it'll stay good in a container for, like a couple of weeks and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. But I'm gonna go ahead and start getting my pan warmed up. I don't want to get too hot right off the bat. I'm using a cast iron, or not cast iron. This is a carbon steel pan. It's kind of got the same properties as a cast iron. I like using it for searing meats and fish. It just it holds the heat better and creates a better sear, in my opinion. I like to also use a little bit of paper towel to kind of dry off my salmon skin. When I'm about to sear it, I want it to be nice and smooth and not too wet. Don't salt your fish before you do this. This glaze that we're going to use is all the flavor that it's going to need. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of my olive oil to my pan. I'm going to bring my knife over here, and I'm just going to cut these. Use a sharp knife when you do it, because my knife is clearly not sharp enough. Just cut a couple of strips into it. And it's just so that your salmon doesn't seize up and curl into itself. Okay, skin side down. Do it slowly so you don't splash yourself. And I like to give mine a little press. I want it to be nice and evenly seared on all sides. I want that skin really nice and crispy. It's one of the parts of this recipe that I really, really love, is it's meant to have a nice, real crispy skin and a very rare to medium rare salmon. Now your salmon is going to stick to your pan a little bit when you first put it in, and that's normal, and you don't necessarily want to try to rip it off the bottom. I kind of like to give mine a little wiggle here and there and just check my size. But once it's hot enough, it's going to come off on its own. Once again, this goes back to what I was doing with the potato, where I'm like scooting it around in the pan. It helps with the evenness of your cook on your salmon. Let's see, I'm still a little bit sticking to the bottom here, so I'm gonna let it keep going. There's no need to force it to be done early. Let it cook. It's not gonna burn on that bottom side unless you've got your pan way too hot. There we go, we've got a little bit of unsticking action going on here. And now I'm just going to kind of move it around a little bit. Try not to get hot too much. Once again, this recipe calls for a medium rare salmon. If you don't like your salmon now, medium rare, feel free to cook this up. I personally enjoy mine that way. I am going to flip this over and just sear it a little bit on the one side. Always, when you're flipping in a pan, always flip it away from you. I'm going to go ahead and take this out. And I'm going to pop it in my oven with my potato pancakes for the time being. Alright, so one of the things that I talked about in our earlier recipe with the sauce is the wasabi powder. My wasabi powder is a little bit chunky, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of just poke it a little bit just to kind of loosen it up. And I'm going to go with both my lime juice and the ketchup mayo. And I'm going to go ahead and start stirring that in, and I'm going to dump in my wasabi powder. The point to this sauce is to reduce it and make a glaze, so you're waiting for it to get really nice and thick. You want to do it while your pan's still hot, that way it reduces nicely. And then you're going to use a basting brush to brush this onto your salmon. And just kind of give it. It's a little thin still. It probably needs just like another minute. In the meantime, I'm going to take my plate out of the oven. Trim that off. See, now it's nice and thick, has this wonderful glaze consistency to it. I'm going to just set this here for the time being. I'm going to take my potato pancake. This one turned out really well. You can see the difference between the two of them. You know, this one's got a little more thickness to it. This has that more stringy consistency. I really like the way this looks. It has more of the same look that the one in the book had. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to roll this over first, the salmon, and we're going to baste the bottom side first. You're just going to brush it on. This stuff, since the ketchup mamas is very potent and very thick in and of itself. So you don't need to, don't need to overdo it necessarily with this. Once that's on, we're going to take this and I'm going to flip it over and put it right on top of my potato pancake. And we're going to take the rest of this and just glaze the top with it. The flavor of this glaze with the wasabi sabayon is really, really wonderful. They complement each other greatly. I'm going to give my wasabi a little stir here. It's been staying warm on our water that we use to make our double boiler. And then in the book, it's got the nice little spoon sitting next to it with the wasabi on it. I personally want more than that on this plate, so I'm going to do a little surround. I think the color of the sauce is lovely and the flavor is fantastic, and even this amount, you're going to want more on your plate by the time you're done. And that's it. You can, if you're looking for a vegetable to serve with this as well, you can serve it with bok choy. That's what they're serving it in the book with. And I think in the picture, it doesn't say, but I think there's some beets with it as well. And they're probably pickled beets because the Swedish are known for that, for pickling vegetables. And that's your dish. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll be coming at you with more videos.